we have leveled off as far as people, so I think we're good to go.
Excellent. Thanks so much, John. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Emily. I'm the VP of Strategy here at Alt RPO. I work with John and Sean, and we're so excited to have you join us for episode 11, I believe. We're on 11 today, which is amazing. Welcome to episode 11 of the Adapt and Overcome webinar series. So we are so excited to jump into today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining us. We have some amazing guest panelists today, and they will introduce themselves in a minute. Their LinkedIn profiles are in the chat, so you can find them and connect after the webinar. In today's episode, as we've been doing through this series, we're focusing on organizational transformation in the wake of this COVID-19 pandemic we all find ourselves in. Our host will be having a panel-style discussion with our awesome guests, and we encourage all of you that are attending to participate by putting any resources, ideas, tips, things that you're finding that are working into the chat. And while we're getting started here, if you want to just jump in with your name and where you're watching from, we love hearing that too. You can also use the Q&A box to submit any questions you have for the panelists. And we really encourage you to do that. So please make sure you keep the questions in the Q&A box as the chat can get kind of busy. We'll try to get to those as we start. Without further ado, here's our host, John. He's our facilitation Jedi here at Alt RPO. John's a master facilitator who focuses on team building and process improvement, and he's conducted hundreds of workshops, and he leverages his experience as an innovation team leader, the U.S. Navy, to help shift teams into collective and collaborative thinking. And Sean, who's the CEO of Alt RPO, we're a team building facilitation company with a 100% remote team. Prior to Alt RPO, Sean took part in various startups focused on human performance, and he leverages his experience as a Navy SEAL to bring a unique perspective to the current challenges we face. So, John and Sean, take it away.
Boom. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll get everybody to introduce yourself to the people that are in attendance. And I'll kick it off to Deana just because I used your amazing joke. So you can go first.
Thanks for that, John. My name is Deana Pape, and I work for Integrated Project Management. I'm the Director of Operations, and we're a consulting firm that focuses on planning and execution of strategic projects. So that might be a product development project or a mergers and acquisition, the integration of that. It might be business optimization, any sort of strategic project where you have a lot of different functional groups that need to come together. And we work across industries, so pharmaceuticals, medical devices, healthcare, consumer products, all sorts of fun stuff.
Awesome. Chris?
Hey, I'm Chris Townson. I'm the CEO at DTC Communications. We are a rural infrastructure provider in Middle Tennessee. We cover about 800 or 900 square miles, I guess, east of Nashville. And we do fiber to the home. We provide phone, internet, TV, business solutions, all of that kind of good stuff to businesses and residential customers in our area. And as you can imagine, we have seen significant demand during this time. So it is an interest. I'm excited to be part of this panel today.
Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan Kane. I'm a senior manager with the Canadian Forces Morale and Welfare Services. I like to say that that is basically like a giant municipality that we provide services to our military members here in Canada, across the country as well as overseas. So my portfolio is basically recreation, community services, all of that good stuff that keeps our families active, healthy, and engaged to support our members' bigger mission.
Boom. And Adam, round us out.
Sure, great. So Adam Rothberg, I'm with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. If you're not familiar with us, we are the premier facilities-based youth development agency, serving approximately 4 million kids through direct service and outreach across 4,800 facilities in the United States, and then on every military base across the globe.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, we've got quite the lineup today, so it should be really exciting. Lots of different viewpoints. And for those who have attended before, we really like to, kind of keep a structured webinar, but we also like to just have a lot of conversation going back and forth. So we typically like to kick these off by looking at the biggest adaptations your organization or your company has made in the last 3 to 4 weeks since COVID-19. So maybe we can kick that off and start with Chris, because I'm sure there's been some pretty significant changes there.
Yeah, I would say, to say the least, there's been significant changes. We moved 70% of our workforce to working from home. 30% who can't work from home are staging from home, meaning they're driving vehicles home that they didn't before. We're trying not to cross areas so we don't cross-contaminate, because we're still having to go into homes and businesses to provide services. So 70% of the workforce is working remotely. We've seen a 300% increased demand in our orders from this time last year. We're doing 3 times the work and now just thrown into a remote environment. And in addition to that, just the internet usage by itself, we saw 1 year's worth of demand increase in less than 2 weeks. So the strain on the network was significant too. We're very thankful that we had a very robust network, really good people that worked with us to ensure that we were doing things well in advance. But as you can imagine, the stress has been real on our people. And so that's by far the biggest thing that we're having to adapt to, is how do we move 3/4 of the workforce away from the office where we communicate face-to-face every day, still communicate as well, because with 3 times the demand, we're probably communicating more than we were before. So that's by far the biggest adaptation to us.
It's pretty amazing. Adam, how about the Boys and Girls Club of America? How's that adaptation-wise? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's been a huge shift. So as I mentioned in the introduction, we're a facilities-based youth serving agency. So, we see about 500,000 kids on a daily basis, typically during normal times. And currently I got to look at the statistics, like 85% of our facilities are down. And the remaining are only really serving essential workforce families. So 3 big shifts that we've made. One, we moved to sort of serving those families that had essential workers. So, healthcare, utilities, folks like Chris, frankly, and his team, to ensure that they can get out and that the infrastructure, frankly, stays in place and that they're not having to stay home with their kids. We've also moved to a lot of virtual programming, much like the schools are doing. And then we've also pivoted strategically. A lot of our facilities are filling in for some of those areas. We're talking about sort of Maslow's hierarchy stuff, providing meal services, working with the food banks, and just trying to figure out how to get to those kids, because the demographic that we serve are oftentimes really high need. And so they're at very high risk. And so we're still trying to figure out what's the best way to get to them and provide some level of service to at the very basic level, keep them safe. All that said, we're also national organization where I'm housed. We're 100% remote at this point, full travel ban. And our 65,000 staff members across the enterprise, many of them, with the exception of those serving essential workers and then doing meal service, they're also doing remote. So it's a huge challenge, huge adaptation for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely dig into that more as well. Sure. And just a reminder, any questions, we do get a lot of good feedback from the audience, so feel free to drop any thoughts or comments in chat, and any questions you have specific to the panelists or the discussion we're having, feel free to drop those in the Q&A section. So Deana, what are you seeing as far as adaptation goes?
Well, most of our staff are consultants, so we're often on site at the clients. So from a home office perspective, we're seeing them even less than we were before, but many of them were away from us at the corporate offices in various locations already. So transitioning from an internal perspective wasn't as much, except for the corporate staff, which they're a huge support to us, and they always are at the corporate office, and now they're all divided up. But mostly for our clients, they've all had different rules that we've been abiding by, and a majority of them are refocusing their portfolios. So I had mentioned before that a number of them are pharmaceutical companies or medical device companies, healthcare, CPG. So they've been having to reprioritize, and we've been doing a lot more risk assessments. We do those as a standard procedure with the projects we're running, but they've been much more intense. So I would say probably the biggest difference is the intensity or the reshifting of portfolios of work.
And before we go to Ryan, I think this is one of the reasons why having the four of you here is actually really special, because for anybody listening right now, I met them at a Disney Institute course on business excellence, and everything that we talked about had to do with culture and how you communicate and collaborate internally and externally, and all of these things. And as you're listening to the four of you, right? So before I go to Ryan, you know, morale, right? And culture, and how that builds into the infrastructure that you need, which is what Chris was talking about, and how you're going to be able to do this remotely, and how you're going to take your teams into the future from this point in time, is a reason why the four of you are on here, other than the fact that I had a great time with you all. I think that you guys all serve as an intake or an output to the other in some way, shape, or form for everything that you guys do. So I'd love to hear kind of your, you know, build on that culture, build on that morale. Obviously answer the same question, Ryan, but I'm going to try to weave you guys into each other if you can. So Ryan, over to you for the same question for how you guys are adapting and either your own team maintaining that morale and or for the people that you serve.
Well, I think for us, one of the big challenges, obviously, we are a service delivery agency. We are much smaller than our counterparts in the US. So our staffing is around 4,000 across Canada and overseas. But what I have seen and what has most impressed me is the flexibility and the ability of the staff to adapt quickly. And I think that goes back to what we've establishing that core teamwork that we've established. And we really model that off our military colleagues. So that's enabled us to quickly react and deal with the situation at hand. No one's focused on, well, my job title is, or my job description says this. You know, much like Adam was talking about, well, we're moving to virtual programming. Well, how are we going to do that? That might mean that we don't have virtual educators. So I need someone who normally runs a facility to help out creating those virtual classrooms. I need someone to come aboard and teach something because I'm in the recreation setting. I need someone who's going to be able to talk about how to organize birthday parties for your kids now that we're all doing things virtually, and how can we share our expertise. So it's really about finding what our experts and strengths are and helping out the rest of the team. In an organization that is spread out throughout Canada, communications has been key. So we've looked at how can we maximize the teams. I have a staff person who focuses mainly on national programming levels, but I've lent her to the comms team because she's an expert with our website. So she can help get up those updates faster and making sure our employees are staying engaged and informed. So for me, I think that's really been how I've seen that adaptation, is that because we had that teamwork and that solidification done in advance, it didn't matter. We were able to quickly adapt the crisis and move forward. I'm sure both you, Sean, and you, John, you having been deployed before, you know that, you know, in a deployed environment, things change very quickly and you have to be able to react. And I know from my experience in deployment, that's what I took away from, and we immediately put that into play when we were moving forward with our plans and what we wanted to accomplish as teams.
That's all. So off of that exact thread, I'm going to ask Chris, from your standpoint, and this is off of what Ryan said, as far as, you know, stripping the title from you and going with the strengths of your team, et cetera. Have you found anything like that in your organization? Have you tried new things that you hadn't before? Are you find yourself kind of reorganizing on the fly? Like, how does that look for you guys?
Yeah, we're doing that in some areas. And it's funny that you asked me, because I was going to jump in and say to Ryan that when you're looking at not just adapting, but the overcoming part of this, what's amazing is, you know, we're trying to keep people connected when they need communication the most, but we're also trying to connect new people who aren't connected today. And in doing that, the strain that has been caused by that, is amplified when you're trying to make decisions with limited information in a dynamically changing environment. That's where we all are, right? We're trying to make decisions. We have limited info. We have limited control on what's going on. So by nature, we've made some significant changes. My core team still, we meet virtually every morning for up to 1 hour. And that may sound crazy because we have so many different things going on, but we're trying to hyper communicate so we don't lose anything, between departments so that everything can flow. But we've had people that we've moved around from department to department. This very morning, we've identified a broken process. We pulled people from 4 different departments that are frontline employees that could and probably should be doing other things. And we're saying we've created a mini team, and they have to report back within 48 hours of define the problem or define the process, define the problem, and communicate back potential solutions with everything on the table. And so we're not just doing that from the leader's perspective. We're doing that at every level of the company where we've changed the process. For example, we're asking health questions before we go into a home or business, right? And we're depending on the customer to tell us the truth before we can go in, even though we're still wearing PPE. But in addition to that, we've created processes now where customers can install themselves without us going inside with our help. So we can now do that over FaceTime. We can do that through a phone call. We can do that literally standing outside the window, talking this way to the customer, but social distancing in the process. So yeah, I think for us, we've used that term, everything's on the table. And we already have a core value, essentially that, everyone picks up garbage. It doesn't matter what your title is. And so for that perspective, you just don't walk past a piece of garbage. You pick it up no matter who you are at my company. And that just, it's a level playing field. And so everyone has, we may have different titles, but and different roles, but there's equal value. And so for that, we can throw people in and out, and we're doing that consistently.
If I can jump in there and kind of connect another piece of, you guys all have mentioned culture a couple of times, as well as leadership. And one of the things that we've had some shared learnings in our organization around the art of followership, which doesn't have to do with titles, right? And that people need to jump in and help out, right? You might have ideas, but keep all the positivity going and be a good follower as well, regardless of your title, right? The CEO can be a follower, the front desk person can be a follower, everybody can help out. And so knowing where your place is and where you can help and recognizing that, right? All of us as leaders are trying to recognize where all of our colleagues and friends can help out in various aspects of what we're doing.
I want to ask Adam something really quick. And this is, when you are working towards the impact of all of these kids and whether you are hyper-focused or not, everything you do or don't do has a significant impact on those that you serve. So have you guys had to iterate through some of those conversations, or is it more of kind of like a, put it out from the top and you guys disseminate the information quickly? Like how are you guys doing that with that kind of impact on the back end?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me just make sure I understand you correctly. So the impact that we're going to have potentially on the youth that we're serving or not, how's that impacting us? Is that your question, John?
Yeah, just because anybody can, like, I can iterate with my business, but if I fail, it's on me and it's not that big of a deal. If you guys fail, and I don't mean to call it out like this, if you guys fail to that extent, the impact on those kids is lasting. So I'm just wondering if that changes how you guys are ideating throughout this.
Yeah. No, I mean, the stakes are really high, frankly, with the business that we're in. And so there is less room for error. And yet at the same time, this is, uncharted territory for all of us. So, really the first 2 weeks, and I have to hand it to our leadership team for building a strategy sort of within the strategy about how to respond. So we've got sort of a 3-phased approach here. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to get this exactly right, but it's like recover, then rebuild and restart. And so we're trying to think more strategically at this point. The first step was, essentially the system went down and within, 3 or 4 days. And so it was like, how do we get services to those kids in the immediate? We have some amazing partners that have been helping us. Certainly, the Coca-Cola company, Kimberly Clark, I'll just call those two out because they've been tremendous support. So we're using some of those resources and those partners to think through how to manage some of these issues. And at the same time, we've had to go through some internal reorganization to really think about how do we deliver the service in the most efficient way possible, which is a great opportunity that we hope can stick, through the duration of this crisis and then beyond, because there's always things that we can do better. The other piece, is the impact on our staff, frankly, because when you think about what's happening on the, sort of in the field and with those kids, there's a huge sort of, emotional health and wellness issue at stake. So we've leaned a lot on our EAP providers, and we're also doing stuff, back to your original question, to maintain the health and wellness of our team members. And one of the things that I've found that has been incredibly helpful has been just, the piece that I find that you miss through the virtual is that emotional connection, right? So we've done a lot of things, at the beginning and the end of each meeting to try and establish those personal, emotional connections among our team members, to ensure that that's in place, and also just to kind of ease some of the, maybe the anxiety or stress associated with the work that we do. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. And Adam, building on that, I think it's great that the organization is aware and proactively, if you will, addressing that fact, that mental wellness piece.
Yeah.
You had kind of alluded to some of the things that you're trying. Are any specific examples that we could, kind of share with the people that are listening who are going through the same thing, different organization, but, trying to draw lines to how can we focus on mental wellness?
Yeah, I mean, I think real easy stuff that we've been doing, at the beginning. We have a team meeting every day, just like Chris, where we kind of regroup and, try and solve problems really rapidly through iteration or otherwise, trial and error. But at the beginning of each of those meetings, we'll do something kind of, like we'll pass out 3 questions for people, like, favorite book, favorite movie, favorite activity, and then we'll end the meeting. What's one thing you're going to do for yourself, today? My supervisor will throw that out, and then every person has to say, yeah, I'm going to take a walk, or I'm going to, I'm going to go exercise, or I'm going to spend some time with my family. I'm going to connect with my friends. And then we have some resources that we'll push out. I've been helping with some of that on our team, just giving people some thoughts around, what can you do to help kind of, keep yourself mentally and physically well through this.
So I'm going to go to Deana in just 2 seconds. But at some point, either if you're listening as an attendee, you can go ahead and throw your favorite, and we'll share this obviously with the other people that are listening. Share your favorite book, your favorite activity, and what you're going to do for yourself. So if you're listening, take out the computer, type that in, your favorite book, your favorite activity, and what you're going to do for yourself today. And then again, before I pass it on, we will try to get that from the 4 of you guys and then put it on after the fact, so that somebody has something to go to from this, because I really like that. I think that's special. So sorry, I know I cut you off, Deana, but over to you.
You're fine. I was just going to suggest one of the things that somebody in our organization, so we're a nationwide organization spread all over, so we don't always get together in meetings very often, but Karen, one of the great folks in our corporate staff, she's actually the executive admin to our CEO. She has been collecting, she sent out a series of 10 questions, and she's just been collecting fun stories, either funny realizations you've had while working from home, embarrassing stories, or how have you been helping your neighbors or your community, or what's your project been doing. So it might be work related, it might be home related. And she's been publishing every other week or so a Silver Linings publication, and she sends it out to the whole company. And there's been lots of, every time I've read it, I've at least smiled, if not, I've at least laughed out loud at least once, and just smiled and thought it was very cool to recognize all the good that our colleagues are doing.
Similar to the jokes that I told in the beginning. I know, sorry.
I'll add them to the next issue.
I was going to say that one of the One of the nice things that you can do as well is just give yourself time to have those and make those connections. So when you're planning a meeting, make sure you plan that extra little bit of time to have that casual conversation instead of moving right through to an agenda. And when you're doing one-on-one calls with your team, give them that time to tell you about their day and how they're doing. And be cognitive of like the different stresses that are going on. So not only the anxiety about COVID, but now about having to teach kids and managing households and figuring out all of that stuff. There's a lot of stress and anxiety that I think we're all feeling. And sometimes, you know, with our staff and our teams, they need that space to breathe. And you might be that person, that one person today that isn't attached as a family member. So, you know, we kind of made a few jokes maybe around the office about the increase around divorces at this time, or maybe missing spouses. But if you're that one person that can be that sounding board, allow that space. And check in with what I like to call some of the more vulnerable people that you may have on your team, those who are single, so who don't have a family or a pet or a plant to talk to. And you might be that only social connection they have that day. So just be cognizant of it, because that little extra time of asking how they're doing might just make it easier for them to get through.
And do you have somebody, and I don't, this is a rhetorical ask, so you can answer it if you'd like to, or we can move on to the next question with Sean. But I guess something that's been on my mind a lot is I've been hearing something like that response, not put the same way that you did, but what about the people that are in leadership? So like, who does Chris go and talk to as the CEO? Like, does he have someone that he needs to reach out to, or is that just a friend or a mentor, or what? And for you, Ryan, in your organization, do you have somebody like that that you can reach out to as opposed to just helping other people? Like, help yourself, put on your own oxygen mask, as Dr. McCauley said last week. Do you have somebody like that?
Yeah, and I think that's really important to identify, whether it was, if you don't have one now, now's the time to do it. So absolutely, I have colleagues that I can reach out to, but I also have as well bosses as well that I can go to, or mentors. And I think the other thing too is I did go back to my boss and said, hey, you can talk to me if you need to. Like, you can reach out and don't be afraid to delegate. I think that was one of the challenges that maybe he was facing, is that he wanted to be the hero for everybody. And he wanted to kind of make the big win. And I said, listen, I don't even need the credit. I can do all the work from behind the scenes, but delegate. You don't have to do it all. We're all in this together.
Yeah, so for me, I think there's 3 places that I go. Number one, we have an employee assistance program where we actually have paid for professional help. That's private, it's confidential. You can talk to professionals through phone or online. We'll pay for 6 in-person visits whenever it's safe to do that as well. So, you know, so we're working hard for our employees to have someone to talk to, and I can take advantage of that as well. Also, I have counterparts in our industry, and actually in my region, there are 6 other folks just like me. We have had a call 5 days a week, early morning, since this started, every single morning, to ensure that we're all on the same page and know how to help each other and react. And it has been wonderful. And the third place for me, have a group of guys that I go to church with, just to be honest with you, that we lean on each other a lot. And they have really been great to reach out and say, hey friend, how's it going today? What can I help you with? You know, what can we talk about? What can we pray about? So that's been pretty amazing. And all that obviously is secondary to for me, my wife and my kids, because they're the most amazing support system that I have. So I'm very fortunate. I have lots of areas that I have support, and I know that some people may not have that, but I'm like Ryan, I would definitely try to identify a couple of areas and focus in on those and tell people you need help if you do.
So as we're since we're kind of going down this route of mental wellness, health, and fitness, you personally, you know, what are just one example of what you're doing, you know, to keep yourself mentally, physically dialed in? Maybe Deana, we could start with you.
Sure. Yeah, wellness or health, right? There's financial health, mental health, physical health, all of those things, and everybody around us is being impacted in different ways and different amounts. So just trying to be compassionate. But personally, I have a space that I've set up so that work is usually almost always in the same place all the time, but I do allow myself to move somewhere else if I need to. And I try to fit in walks everywhere I can. I feel like alignment across all these organizations takes a lot longer now that we're all virtual, right? You don't bump into anybody and resolve anything. So if I can take a phone call without my computer, if I don't need it, I'll try and get outside if the weather's okay, or I'll walk circles around my house or my driveway or whatever if I need to stay close. But try to get in some outside time, even though we're supposed to self-isolate. That doesn't mean you have to stay indoors the whole time. And mostly I just ensure I have a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. I focus on what I can change, what I can learn, how I can support others, those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's great. Growth mindset is definitely something that's kind of top of mind, especially during this time. It's real easy we always talk about it. We call it control what you can control. And it's something that, we're always discussing internally and always thinking about is there's a lot of stuff we can't control right now, but let's focus in and lean in on the stuff that we can. So Adam, personally, mentally, physically, what are you doing to keep yourself dialed in?
Yeah. So right when I saw this transpiring, we got the sort of the stay at home from work anyway. I kicked off a health and wellness challenge.
Nice.
With a group of friends and 3 or 4 coworkers. I got about 15. I tried to drag John in, but he gave me the hard pass. And so it includes, an exercise goal. So mine's like 500 calories using my heart rate monitor, and then 7 hours of sleep, and then 3 healthy meals. And then I got a point system. It's all in like a Google spreadsheet. So, I'd like to say that this is altruistic. It's really not. It's for me so that I can, I'm sort of motivated by the number and watching my friends and colleagues try and beat this number. But it's also just a nice distraction, and then helps me, kind of reminds me, okay, go exercise, or, get to bed, or eat right, because the refrigerator's within 10 feet, right? So that's kind of the physical health and wellness piece. And then, I'm setting up for the sort of the mind and the spirit. I've got a weekly call with my 2 closest friends. One's here, but I can't see him, right? And then I got another guy in Boston. And so last night we talked for a half hour, and then we watched a movie together using that Netflix party thing, and just laughed a little bit together. And so that was sort of the mind and spirit. And then I'm also making really conscious effort to set aside like a half hour. I love to read, and usually I'm traveling a lot, so I listen to a lot of books, and I don't have that right now. So I'm just setting aside a half hour and just reading some books or listening to some books, just to kind of stimulate my thinking outside of work. So I've been pretty good with pretty disciplined around that stuff.
It's excellent.
So far.
Sean, I want to cut you off really quick, because I don't think that you'll be as pointed towards Adam as I am. Is there any way, Adam, that you could share, maybe not invite people into the ring of things that you are doing, but maybe what the points are and what the things, because it's like fantasy football for your personal health. And I think it would be really cool to share that with the people that are listening in, because I don't want to be on your point system. I don't want you to see that I slept for 9 hours, and is that too many points, or is that a good thing or a bad thing? All that stuff. So I'll try to get from you what we can at the end of this, so that we can maybe share that.
I've sent out a bunch of communication, and I do a weekly update where I give some information around why you sleep or how you sleep, some resources. And I'm not recreating this because I did it in October, and so this is just like, I saw an opportunity to do it again, and it's easy. So I'll send you those materials.
It's an awesome way to gamify it, though.
Yeah. It's fun.
So we're gonna shift, and if we have time, we'll come back to this. We talked a little bit, and I think everybody hinted towards it. Some of the challenges that are still standing in your way that you're working through, ultimately looking at overcoming. So maybe Chris, what's still standing in your way, and what's the biggest challenge that you guys are currently facing?
Yeah, I mean, one day-to-day challenge is PPE, the protective equipment for my guys. It's procuring that and finding that balance of knowing that there are medical people in my community that need it too, and not trying to be selfish, but also we, back to something Adam was saying earlier about, about the impact on the kids. And, for us, our communities are living and dying by connectivity, or lack thereof. And so, we're critical and essential. And, last week I was on a call with, one of the directors at CISA at Homeland Security, just trying to make sure that we're doing things the right way. And, along with several other people, but making sure that we have the proper, not just the proper technology for our employees to connect and to do their job, but those physical things that we're trying to procure, like PPE. And we're kind of building everything on 3 pillars, and that is employee safety, it is customer safety, and then it's business continuity. And so we're trying those 3 pillars kind of undergird every single decision that we do. And if we can't meet all 3 of those, then we don't do it. And so that's a challenge when you're told, keep doing what you're doing by Homeland Security. You're told to keep doing what you're doing by the governor of your state. The mayors in your communities are saying, you've got to get this done. It's critical. And then you're saying, I will, but I've got to keep my people safe. And so I feel the weight of that, Sean. And to me, that's one of the hardest things on a daily basis, is saying, what can I do to not be selfish, but also still have what I need to get the job done.
Yeah, that's a massive obstacle without a doubt. And again, I'll just state, anybody that, that's listening, we're all about sharing ideas as well. So, just because we're panelists and hosts of this doesn't mean we have all the answers. So, we're open to creativity. We're open to any ideas you may have. Feel free to blast them out in the chat. And any Q&A, any questions you have, feel free to drop those into the Q&A section. So Deana, as far as from an overcome standpoint, what are you, and it might be more so your clients, what are you seeing as kind of the big obstacle that's facing them?
I think if I had to narrow it down to one thing, it would be alignment. It takes a lot of time all the time, but now that we're separated, I kind of mentioned this before, alignment is really difficult, and taking the extra time, having the discipline to do that, right? The epidemic is giving us the motivational urgency that you need to keep people's focused attention on things. But having that discipline, or the processes right, did you talk to everybody that you needed to? All of that is taking more time, and we're trying to squash that in. And even though we don't have the commutes we had before, I still feel like my day is even longer than it ever used to be. And so that alignment is hard, right? Communication is always hard. It's one of the things we all have to work on, right? Nobody's perfect at it. So making sure that we're disciplined and helping each other achieve those goals successfully, and focused on the alignment and the communication in a positive manner, right? You don't want to be the naysayer. You don't want to be but if it's an issue, you definitely want to bring it up, right? So keeping calm, being compassionate, staying disciplined so that you can be successful.
Great. And it's a really good point on communication as well. We were actually talking about this earlier, and almost Zoom fatigue, or, being on a video screen all day long. And one of the things is, even though we can't meet in, face to face, we still have a whole bunch of options as far as how we can communicate. And at some point it's like, okay, are we communicating too much? Are there too many avenues of communication? And how can you control those and shrink those down and make it so that, hey, this next 10 minutes is going to be for making decisions versus, critical thinking or problem solving. So
we do that a lot in our, one of the disciplined approaches that we have for all of our meetings, at least in my company and with our clients, is that we have an agenda. And on that agenda, you not only have the topic and who's leading that topic, but what's the expected outcome? Are we just brainstorming? Are we trading information? Are we coming to a decision? And making it very clear before you start the meeting, who needs to come prepared, all those kinds of things. But having that expected outcome is really helpful for making sure that the participants are aware of what you're trying to get to.
Brian, I want to bring you into the fold there from what you were saying earlier, which to me, hearing this often leads to some people saying, like, blurring the lines between where does work end and life for yourself begin, and vice versa. And we've had some pretty healthy discussion on, tips and tricks and whatnot. But for you, is that happening with you as far as the people that you're serving and whatnot? And this goes back to my earlier question, which is your own mental sanity of when do you stop the blurred line and move on into yourself type of thing. So you can answer whatever I just said or tail off of what Deana said earlier.
Well, I think for myself, I know I'm a workaholic, and I know and I admit it. I'm Ryan, and I'm a workaholic. So I enjoy that aspect of doing my day-to-day job, and because I love what I do. I love who I serve, and I love the impact we make in the community, and I think it's important, and I like supporting the field in their ability to do that. So for me, that keeps me motivated and keeps me interested, and it keeps me engaged. Serving a large population nationally, it means that we have time zones that we're working with. So just because I'm starting on Eastern time zone doesn't mean my Pacific Coast guys are not needing that support as well. So for me, I think it's just a matter of it's a personal element, and it's making sure I take breaks throughout the day and doing some of the stuff that everyone has talked about. The biggest thing I think that I find for myself in that mental health zone is turning off the news. At this point, most of it, whatever network you watch, is mostly talking heads. And they're just repeating the same thing over and over again, and that wears on us. So get your news once per day, find out what's going on in the world, and then see if you can leave it. The other big thing that I try to finish the day with is gratitude. No matter what has gone on, good, bad, ugly, I try to finish with trying to find 3 things that I'm grateful for, that I appreciate. Some days it might just be the fact that my computer didn't freeze up during a Zoom meeting. It doesn't have to be big things, but it's finding those elements of being grateful, because it reminds us that, you know what, yeah, this is a difficult time, but we will get through this. And it could be a lot worse. We're so lucky, and I certainly think of the generations before us that went through, the depression and all of those things. They didn't have Zoom, and they didn't have that ability to connect. So I think we're really lucky. And I take that moment at the end of the day before I fall asleep to appreciate where we're at.
That's awesome. And actually, not that we did this exactly on purpose from the start, and this is more of an iteration, is how can you do this type of thing without the virtual fatigue? And one of our solutions is to bring on people that complement each other, kind of like you guys, or you guys really. And it's getting those nuggets out that you might have heard 5 or 6 times from your husband or your wife or your brother, but when you hear them from the right person in the right context, you actually take that tip or trick and you leverage it and you put it to use. So when I was on the phone with Adam the other week, and he suggested this fantasy draft of your life. He didn't call it that, but that's kind of what went to my mind. I was like, no way. Now I'm sitting here going, all right, I don't want in, but maybe that would have been a really good idea for me to do, So sharing those tips and tricks. And if you guys at any point in time have them, if you're an attendee and have them, we don't want to, slaughter the dead horse or anything like that, but they're valuable. People read them and they go, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about that. And, this person just said it exactly how I was feeling it. So I don't know if this is an awkward way of me to stop and either Sean to ask a question or for one of you guys to tail into me, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Because communication's hard and how you do it matters. The audience has to listen in a certain way, right? So that's why you got to repeat it, John.
And Adam, is a glass of wine on your list there? Do I get points for glasses?
Yeah, well, sort of. We have health detractors. That's up to you. It could be soda or, glass of wine. But for this one, I did put a caveat in there, and I said, under the circumstances, if you want to have a glass of wine, or I'm kind of a craft beer guy, then it's fine. But if you start to have more of those things, your vices, then you have to start subtracting points. So we got a little bit more leniency this time around.
Excellent. So we typically poll each of these webinars that we do, and we've seen consistently over the last three plus weeks now that we've been doing this, productivity is always one of the biggest challenges that teams are facing. we've talked a little bit about it today, but maybe if Chris, if you could start, what's something specific that you're doing with productivity in mind?
So it's kind of funny how different departments within my company are experiencing varying levels of productivity. Like I said, we've seen a 300% increase in orders from this time last year, and we're delivering. So I think what's interesting about that is that we've had so much interest. Like, for example, we're not doing outbound calls to tell people that we can sell them our service because we have more than we can get done. And so it's interesting. I've had to pull back productivity in an area like a customer experience rep or a sales rep that would normally be going out and meeting people and transitioning them into more of a support role. So I guess part of the way to answer this, Sean, is we're redefining what productivity is, right? We still have a number of orders to get done, but you may not be doing what you normally do today to help accomplish that task. And for my guys outside, productivity really is, it is the numbers game, right? It's how many orders can you get done today safely, and without missing any of those health questions or wearing PPE or doing things that would put yourself or the end user at risk. So I think one of the things that's helped us is even my guys who normally wouldn't do a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or whatever, we're requiring that multiple times per week. So we talk about high technology and high touch, and we try to have a good combination of that. And so we're trying to be more high touch through technology than we've ever been before with our own teams. So even my guys who normally wouldn't do something like this, they're now doing that as a team multiple times per week. And that increased level of touch and communication, we are seeing a change of morale and a change of productivity because of that. So short version, initially, during all this, I think we saw morale drop quickly when there were a lot of concerns and questions about safety. We've taken some steps to ensure that we're doing all we can do to be safe in this environment. And then we have required the additional level of communication and touch, and we're requiring that to be over video, not just a phone call. We want them to see each other. Those things together, we've had 3 weeks in a row, the 3 most productive weeks in our company's history since 1951. That's wild. I mean, it's hard to imagine that can happen in this environment. And then without belaboring the point, so someone else can talk, the other part of that I'm concerned about is burnout. Because, I like NASCAR, but, there's a reason they rebuild those engines after one race, because they've pushed it to the limit to the point it's about to blow. And I'm trying to keep my pulse on all of our people consistently and making sure that we're not doing that to people, because that can be a real problem with the kinds of stresses that they're under right now as well.
Absolutely. Adam, from a productivity standpoint, I know you guys have a fair number of challenges you're facing. So where are you guys at with productivity? And
I think that the first thing, and I've done previous Boys and Girls Clubs work in a consulting capacity doing leadership and organizational development, a lot of team work. And one of the things that I'd always encourage our clients to think about was sort of the psychological side of change. And if you're familiar with the William Bridges work, they talk about that kind of, the dip of productivity that occurs with any change. And during that period of time, it's really important to reset expectations, right? For yourself, for your team, if you're in a leadership position, so that people don't feel overwhelmed. To Chris's point, I like that analogy about the NASCAR. It's like you maintain those same expectations that you had during typical times. You're bound to fail. You just are. When you're trying to do something new, like, you're not going to be able to do it as well as you did in the past. So I think that's the first step. The second step is to be strategic about your time. And this is all, I always, during my performance review each year, this is always the area where I say, I can be better, about structuring my time. And so one of the things that I do, and I think I learned this from Neuro Leadership, David Rock, your brain at work, I forget the title of the book exactly, but he talks about doing those strategic tasks first thing in the morning, or whenever your productivity is at its peak. For me, that tends to be in the morning, as opposed to just going in and trying grinding out a bunch of emails or doing like expense reports, that stuff that requires lower level thinking. I'm trying to be much more intentional about doing that work that requires my brain to work harder at those times of day that I have a little bit more fuel, so to speak. And that's not something that we're doing formally, but just something I learned along the way, and I've been using. And it's hard for me to get up and like develop a strategic plan, or put together a presentation for executive leadership. It requires a lot of thinking. I have to force myself, but it paid off because I'm getting more done, more important stuff done, more efficiently.
Okay.
One quick comment back to that we've done is the first 2.5 weeks of the pandemic, we stopped all time off, right? Everyone had to report to work. Everyone had to be present so we could figure out the strategy to move forward with the increased demand. But immediately we've pivoted, and we're now requiring people to take days off.
Yeah.
Because again, concerned about the physical and emotional toll that this is taking on people, even at the highest levels of leadership at our company. Last week, I told people by the end of this week, they had to take at least one day off, and they weren't allowed to answer email or phone calls for the company.
Right.
So again, just trying to find that balance. And I found out that when you're in a position of leadership, that obviously is the hardest thing for us to do, especially like Ryan, when, I'm a workaholic too, but we have to take that time away, or we're also going to burn out, and our people are going to follow our lead. So we're demanding of others, and then we have to demand it of ourselves.
I want to bring in Deana on this piece too, because it's actually good to save you for last before we go to a lightning round with Sean. I think that you, and this goes off the productivity of what we've been talking about, but to bring you in, I think that you think of things a lot differently than most people. Like, you always try to find the best way to get people excited, to keep them excited, and to keep people engaged for that impact that you want. And I noticed that on the first day that I met you, we're sitting there writing down notes of how we could iterate on something to make it better. And my thought is, obviously you're doing that with the people that you work with. I'm just wondering how you potentially integrate that in for their productivity. And you and I both know that, to give everybody an hour is one thing, but to give them an hour and spend the first 10 minutes doing something that's meaningful, to get them excited, means the last 50 minutes are going to be more impactful, and maybe potentially more productive. So do you have any specific examples of how you're doing some of those things with your people? I put you on the spot big time.
You did. I'm sure I can think of some. I do believe, I agree with you, right? If you're not engaging others, you're only seeing this much of what you need to see, right? You need to see as much as possible, even beyond your peripheral vision. And if you don't engage others, you're going to miss something. So, balancing that time, like Chris and Adam were talking about, is hard, right? We have to strategize that. But getting those engaged is important. It's critical to success. So how do I do that? Sometimes it's by incorporating some sort of fun activity in a meeting, like you said. It's being very clear when I do communicate something. So rereading it, making sure it's clear to everyone, having somebody else proofread it. Did you get from this what I think, that whole communication quote about, you may think you know or understand what you think I said? I don't remember the whole quote, but I'm sure some of you know that. So making sure my communication is clear, but engaging others, and many times that takes an additional phone call, right? So if you have a group meeting and you want everybody to participate, you might take 15 minutes to call some of those individuals that are super busy or might be distracted or tend to be quieter, but you really want their input. And another thing is use tools. John, I know you and I have talked about Mentimeter, and that is a really cool software program that has various levels. They do have a free version, but you can survey your crowd and get live responses. I'm actually, right before this, was working on one for a meeting tomorrow, where we can incorporate a nationwide audience and make sure that they're engaging with each other. So maybe I saw you grin when I mentioned Mentimeter, so maybe that's where you were hoping I would go.
I expected that you might have more tricks up your sleeve, but that was one of them, because you and I had that conversation last week, and you were very helpful to me anyways. And I think that's a fantastic tool to have that engagement, and somebody will here correct me. And actually, I need to pass it over to Sean for the lightning round. He didn't want to be rude. Go over to you, Sean.
Thanks. So real quick, before we start the lightning round, we just want to thank all our panelists. We appreciate all the insight that you share. All the attendees that are attending and listening, we appreciate all the feedback that you put into the chat. This Friday, we're hosting a free workshop. It's called Think Inside the Box. It's a bit of a mental resilience, mental health exercise. Get to meet some random people that join up, and then just think through those things that you can control, kind of share a little bit, and then walk away with some actionable items. So if it's something you're interested in, Emily's going to drop that in the chat. Feel free to share that with anyone. Again, it's free. We're just having a fun time with it. With that, we're going to kick into the lightning round. So one question, 60 seconds max per person. Ryan, we're going to start with you, and that's, what's the one thing that you want our listeners to walk away with today?
Oh. I didn't unmute. There you go. I just lost like seconds in the conversation. But basically, rely on your preparation. Most of you have a skill set or a background. You can do this. It's not as scary as we think. So rely on that preparation and that hard work that you've put in, the years of experience that you have, and it will be okay.
Awesome. Chris?
Yeah, the work that we've done before this pandemic is empowering us in the pandemic, and the work that we do now will set our course for the future. So as leaders, this is not the time to back up. This is the time to dig your heels in and do work that really matters. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I have said the most at my company, and we live by this, is at DTC, we do everything we do because people matter, every decision. And if you know your why and you stick to that, then the work you do today is going to have long-lasting impact for the future that will really matter.
Excellent. Adam?
Yeah. So I'll come back full circle to kind of the health and well-being piece, and it's the John Maxwell. I think John Maxwell. You can't give what you don't have, and so I think from a leadership perspective, it's about maintaining your strength and consistency and positivity, so that you can give it, right? So those are my sort of final words.
Excellent. Appreciate it. And Deana?
My 60 seconds would be, it's impossible to fully predict the future, right? The pandemic could be transformative in good ways though. So, and the possibilities are way greater than we can imagine. So if you find yourself focusing on the negative, don't forget to take as much time to start thinking about the unpredictable, the fun, the crazy, the things we're grateful for. What are you wowed by today that you never thought was possible 30 years ago or when you were a kid? So my one thing is 3 reminders. Do something kind every day. Use your energy and this time wisely, and don't rob yourself of the joy. It's there. Find it and acknowledge it.
Excellent. Well, on that note, thanks again. We appreciate everybody attending. Panelists, again, we appreciate you being here. If you are interested, check out the link that Emily posted for Think Inside the Box this Friday. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.